I've seen pretty much all of the concession agreements done on railways on this on the eastern side of this continent. So Ethiopia, Tanzania, obviously RVR, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Zambia. Without naming a specific country, but and this doesn't apply to Kenya, Uganda, but many of these concessions, you find the concession fee that is a fixed amount. So whether the railway is earning revenue or not, it doesn't matter really for the regulatory body or the host government, because they expect to get X million dollars paid, irrespective if there's improvement or not, irrespective if there is any business happening. So obviously clear conflict of interest. So it is extremely important to have an alignment of interest between host government and investor on infrastructure projects, especially when they come in this partnership. Many of the industrial businesses in Kenya complain about Egyptian competitiveness in their exports to this part of the world. The good news to you that this is going to end very soon. Egypt has been living for 40 years on fuel subsidies. Price of diesel in Egypt is around 15 US cents per liter. So that's why they're competitive, not because of any other, sure, there's some other competitive edges, but that's the bulk of the issue. Egypt has been living this past 40 years, as I said, on subsidies, and has been financing, as a government, these subsidies by growing an inflated local debt. Local as in treasury bills, I mean. Egypt consumes around 14 million tons a year of diesel. So you multiply 14 million by the difference between $1 and 15 cents, and you'll just get an idea of the magnitude we're talking about just on one item. Okay. The Egyptian subsidy system is a commodity subsidy, which is extremely inefficient with a lot of leakages. Simply, it's a very profitable business to get hold of Egyptian diesel inland and just get out in the Mediterranean or the Red Sea 10 kilometers and sell it to a boat at $1. That's like 6 times return in 48 hours. Great. It doesn't help the consumers, which was the whole idea about the subsidies. These subsidies are extended into fuel and 5 major food products, tea being one of them, which is, most of our tea comes from Kenya, so in a way the Egyptian government is also subsidizing Kenyan tea consumption in Egypt to Egyptians. So it's a completely messed up system, and the point is that Egypt got away with it historically because we had an investment grade, our macroeconomic fundamentals were sound, stable currency. So there was a lot of interest in Egyptian TBs, treasury bills. Now post-revolution that's not the case, and we are completely clear that that subsidy system in its current form and shape is going out of the window. It's already started on some of the industries, the heavy intensive, the energy intensive industries, and it's going to trickle down all the way to the consumer. All the discussions now going on is that it's a done deal that we have to move from commodity subsidy to cash subsidy, and that's on a temporary basis. Hence, ERC being developed. ERC is basically what we call a second stage generation. Normally, second stage refining. Normally, refineries start with crude oil and end up producing products. We don't do this here. We are situated on the premises of Cork is Cairo Oil Refinery Company, which is a 40-year-old Russian technology built back in the 60s. It produces mostly fuel oil, as you can see, and that's a huge waste given the value you can extract from that heavy fuel oil if you improve the technology. So the whole concept is we're using 2010 Foster Wheeler American technology to basically take that fuel oil, refine it again into the right-hand side yields and products, which obviously have a much higher value. This is a $3.6 billion project, and we've failed to close the finance for it twice. This was the third time we managed to do that. The first time was fully commercial banks backed, and that was in 2006. By 2008, when the financial crisis hit, the commercial banks weren't even around to answer the phones. So that was the first time it failed. Second time, we went and revived it in 2009. By late 2010, we had signed a $2.5 billion 17-year loan package with mostly export credit agencies, Korea and Japan, and the European Investment Bank. We were 2 weeks away from closing the equity side when the revolution in Egypt happened. So that was the second time it failed, literally 2 weeks. And then trying to revive it in the midst of all the political mess that was happening back home when was obviously a huge challenge. The lenders were very understanding. This project is a win-win to everyone, so there were no issues. You'll see some numbers on the following sheet about the impact on the environment and the economy, but the bottom line of the story, the lenders still needed to have a government to get some comfort, and since we had basically three prime ministers in less than a year, that was quite a challenge. Finally, we managed. We managed to close the equity side in June, July this year. I think it was June actually, and that constituted the largest, actually the only foreign direct investment committed in Egypt since the revolution. Actually, we've been more successful in doing this than the government has been in getting IMF support. So I'm glad about that. As you can see, for the Egyptian economy and government, this has a huge impact. Currently, this gap of around 7 million, the 14 million tons of diesel consumed, roughly 7 is produced locally and 7 is imported. By having this production facility in Cairo, the Egyptian government is saving roughly around $300 million, according to their calculations, of import costs. So transport, LC costs, handling costs, losses, you name it. But also very relevant is that it strategically should deal with our shortage issues when it starts production, which is becoming a daily life experience in Egypt. There is nothing that have these standards in Egypt in terms of quality of products, so whether it's on the gasoline or the diesel. Because it's an old the existing refineries in Egypt have an old technology, and the Cairo refinery is the largest of them, so obviously it's extremely environmentally unfriendly. We have around 186 tons of sulfuric acid emission in the Cairo atmosphere. Just in case anyone has been in Cairo and wondering why it's so polluted, this is one of the main reasons. This is now going to be taken out in the second stage refinery from gas form into solid form and sold as a byproduct into industries. So that's an example of a non-formal, a non-contractual. There is obviously a lot of legal contracts, but it's not in a PPP format, but that's still, basically we have an offtake agreement on the heavy fuel oil that the Cairo state-owned refinery produces, and they have, again, an offtake on mostly the diesel that we're producing. So that's a form of cohabitation that we have with them. Second issue is obviously, the second example is Rift Valley Railways, which I'm sure, everyone is more than aware about it. These were the concepts behind the concessioning done back in 2005. So Kenya Railways, Uganda Railways, previously rail operators and asset owners end up being asset owners. They still own the assets, and regulators, whereas RVR supposedly becomes the operator with responsibilities on maintenance and operation for a period of 25 years. The sad story of the current status of railway, I'm sure everyone is aware of it. Basically, railway moves less, probably 10% of that. That 16 million ton per annum is what is in Mombasa inbound. We also have around 2 to 3 million tons, Brown, in transshipments, yeah? Yeah, okay. So these 16 million tons is basically today what is inbound from Mombasa, inlands to Kenya and further west, or exported. And RVR today captures less than 10% of that, or roughly 10% of that. And the main reason for that, if we just get back a little bit to our philosophy of efficiencies, obviously RVR is not efficient, and the railways, generally speaking, have not been efficient the past 20 plus years due to lack of investments in maintenance and spare parts and. So the whole rationale behind our involvement in this is that surgical intervention in the